Good morning, everyone. I suppose I've probably been to about 150 meetings about the Green Deal in the last 2 years. And during that process, which has involved DEC industry forums and past 2030 steering groups and meetings with housing organisations and clients and all sorts of people about the Green Deal, I've gone through a kind of three-phase process. And the first phase is enthusiasm. Here's what we really need, the first step towards a retrofit programme for the UK building stock. If we're going to meet our climate change targets, we absolutely have to get the retrofit programme going. So enthusiasm that somebody was finally giving us a chance to get on with that. Second stage is kind of cynicism, really. After a while, you start to think, oh, this is never going to work. It's way too complicated. It's way too expensive. How can we possibly do this way? And then the third stage, which is just about where I've got to now, and I think some of my colleagues have probably been through the same process, is kind of pragmatism. This is basically the only game in town, so we have to make it work. If we want to do retrofit, if we want to build a retrofit industry, a retrofit supply chain, and sort our stock out to meet the challenge of climate change, then we have to make the Green Deal work. And it is just a finance mechanism, so basically it's down to all of us to make it work. So what I want to do to start with is just take you through what the Green Deal is from the customer's point of view. I guess many of you will have engaged with the Green Deal and know a little bit about it already, so bear with me, those ones. But for those who haven't got there yet, then just to give you a quick description of what's supposed to happen. And this is a slide I nicked from DEC, from the Department of Energy and Climate Change, which was originally called the Customer Journey, and I kind of stripped out the silly marketing speak and called it the Green Deal process. So essentially, the process starts with an assessment. You've got a house or another building, and a Green Deal advisor or assessor comes to your building and makes an assessment using some standard software and creates a thing called the Green Deal plan. And the Green Deal plan is all the retrofit that's going to be applied to that building. The scope of the Green Deal plan is only limited by a thing called the Golden Rule. And the Golden Rule says that the payments that are attached to the electricity meter for that building, subsequent to the installation of the measures, to pay off the finance for the work, must not exceed the fuel cost savings. So if, for instance, I was to do Nick's house, I was come along and create a plan for his house, I save him £1,000 a year on his electricity bill, on his fuel bills, probably on his gas bill, then the charge to pay for that, which is applied to his electricity bill, cannot exceed £1,000 a year. So essentially the scheme is a way of getting retrofit going without the householder paying up front. Essentially, there's a loan given to the house, in a sense, and that is then paid off over 20 or 25 years by a charge on the electricity meter. So having got this assessment and this thing called the Green Deal plan, then the householder can take this plan anywhere they like. They can go to an organisation called Green Deal Providers, and the idea is that Green Deal Provider then organises all this process. So the funding is arranged by the Green Deal provider. A repayment charge is attached to the electricity meter. The funding isn't secured on the property, so you can't lose your house if you default on your Green Deal. And there's also a program called ECO, the Energy Company Obligation, and the ECO fund is a bit like the old CERT and CEF schemes, is essentially grants from the energy companies, the bigger energy companies who have an obligation to spend a certain amount of money saving a certain amount of carbon every year. And their obligation collectively is about £1.3 billion. And so if there are things that need doing to the building that can't be funded under the Golden Rule, that wouldn't meet the cap on finance that the Golden Rule provides, then eco-subsidy in the form of a grant can be levered in as well. The Green Deal provider then arranges for measures to be installed. And I guess many of you may be interested in being installers. And basically, the installers have to be certified under a scheme that ultimately goes back to a document called the BSI's, the British Standards Institute's PAS 2030. That's Publicly Available Specification 2030. What that does is set out the requirements for training and certification of competence for installers of all kinds of measures. So it might be insulation, boilers, ventilation systems, lighting, whatever it might be. PAS 2030 is the world's most boring book. I don't recommend you get it. Let your certification bodies, whoever they may be, look after that for you. If you suffer from insomnia, it's the thing to read because it will just put you to sleep in 20 minutes. And having served on the steering group for it for 2 years now, I'm kind of aware that we're not producing the most attractive product in the world. So the provider has arranged installation. The installer is certified under PAS 2030, mostly through their own schemes. What PAS 2030 does is it collects together the qualification schemes that exist in the industries already and essentially says that you must be qualified under your own industry scheme. So most installers wouldn't have to train in addition. They just have to become certified and their existing qualifications will be good enough. The work that's carried out has to comply with the Green Deal Code of Practice, which is issued by DEC, and with BSI PAS 2030. And the Green Deal provider has to provide guarantees for the work of varying length, but typically around 5 or 5+ years, depending on the nature of the particular products being deployed. Then the last stage of the process is that the householder or the building owner has got their improved building. They've had some insulation perhaps and some ventilation and some heating and some controls and maybe some lighting and so on. And the cost of that becomes converted to a charge over a variable period of years, depending on the lives of the measures, anything from 12 or 10 or 12 up to 25 years. And that charge is shown as a separate charge on the electricity bill for the building. And the electricity company collects that charge and consolidates all the Green Deal charges from all the customers around the place and returns the money to the funding organisations, which are essentially banks. When the building is, when the occupancy or the ownership of the building changes, if you sell the house or if it's tenanted and new tenants come in, the charge transfers to subsequent occupants. So as DEC puts it, you only pay for the measures that are installed in the building when you're enjoying the benefits of the measures. So the charge lasts for its life. And if you offer the building for sale or for rent, you have to disclose that charge to the incoming people, incoming occupants. Now, in that process, the Green Deal provider, the GDP, is critical. And these are new organisations, well, they're existing organisations that become Green Deal providers, setting themselves up. And there are a lot of them are now emerging with their offers under the Green Deal. So what I want to concentrate on this morning really is the role of the Green Deal provider and what kinds of organisations they are, so that those of you who might be interested in either being assessors or advisors or being installers can see where the relationship has to be built. And I think Russell's going to talk after me about a particular model that he's been developing for delivering the Green Deal. So, core tasks of the Green Deal provider. The Green Deal Code of Practice requires all these things to be done. They have the contract with the householder. They organise the finance. They arrange the eco-subsidy. They arrange the installation of the measures. They provide the guarantees. They arrange the repayments via the electricity supplier. And they must also have a process for dealing with complaints. Those are the things that must be done by the Green Deal provider under the Green Deal scheme. And then there's a whole load of other things that they can do but don't need necessarily to do. So over on the right here we have marketing the service, getting households involved, assessing the dwelling, the Green Deal advisor assessor role, specifying the measures, pricing them, installing them, supervising the installation, doing the QAA inspection, managing the project, looking after the customer, and then, very importantly, monitoring and evaluating and providing some feedback on how it's all gone. Now, all of those are optional tasks. They don't have to be done by the Green Deal provider himself or his organisation. So they're all potential roles for subcontractors or partners or consultants or whatever working for the Green Deal provider. And you'll see that some of them have got little red asterisks by them. We've been working, both Russell and I, and with others, on the idea of training and accrediting some people we're calling retrofit coordinators. And their role will be to take on some of these tasks and to be kind of project managers in Green Deal. And we're hoping that over the next few months we'll be training a cadre of people who will be retrofit coordinators, retrofit project managers, working for Green Deal providers, working for householders, working for building owners, getting retrofit to happen. And all the red asterisk tasks on the right-hand side are potentially part of the role of the retrofit coordinator. There are lots of types of organisations starting to become Green Deal providers, and I think it's quite important to sort of try and distinguish them into types and classify them a little bit so that we can understand who it is we're working with. So the first type that probably will have one of the highest profiles, is what I call the retail background Green Deal provider. The likes of Kingfisher B&Q, Marks and Spencer's, Sainsbury's Home Base, those kind of people. They have a focus primarily on the owner-occupied sector. They're interested in selling to owner-occupied households. They are publicly recognised brands, of course. They have very well developed routes to their existing customers. You know, we'll have credit cards with them or accounts with them, and we go to their shops all the time and so on. We maybe have catalogues and do online shopping with them. So they know us well. They have good access to finance, of course. They're national reputable brands. And what they're interested in is actually the Green Deal and the retrofit of our homes driving broader sales for them, things like kitchens and bathrooms and other bits of DIY. Most of them have little or no low-carbon retrofit experience. So they're very inexperienced, even though they'll be managing this process. Few of them have yet got very many installers engaged. I think, well, my experience of them so far is that they have a relatively poor awareness of the technical risks associated with retrofit, and they will probably need technical support. So if you're in the business of some kind of technical consultancy around improving buildings, then there's a real niche for you there, helping Green Deal providers to understand the process and deliver it in a more efficient way and take the risks out of it. The other main type of Green Deal provider is the contractor background. The likes of Kingsmote and Wilmot Dixon and Waits and so on, people who've been doing, organisations that have been doing housing refurbishment and improvement, mostly for housing organisations, for the last few years under the Decent Homes programme. So these organisations will focus, I think, initially on managed housing, their existing clients. So they'll be looking to deliver the Green Deal on behalf of their existing housing clients. They're well known in the industry. They have a great ability, I think, to integrate Green Deal work with a broader housing refurbishment. They've been doing Decent Homes after all. They, again, have good access to Green Deal finance. Many of them are big organisations. They do have low-carbon retrofit experience, not just through Decent Homes, but going a bit further through the Retrofit for the Future programme, which the Technology Strategy Board ran over the last 2 or 3 years. So there's been a lot of experimentation in deep low-carbon retrofit, and most of these organisations have been involved in some of those projects. So they're much more aware of and able to manage the technical risks associated with retrofit than perhaps the retailers are. Most of them have already got their suppliers and subcontract installers identified. They've already got a reasonably well-extant supply chain, but they probably need marketing support. They're good at talking to housing organisations. They're not very good at going out to the public necessarily. And then you might think, well, that's simple. There's retailers and there's contractors, but then it gets more complicated. There's a whole load of other types of organisations who are involved in this kind of thing. Energy companies, clearly getting involved in the Green Deal, similar to the retailers in many ways, good routes to existing customers. We've nearly all got some kind of account with an energy company, if not more than one. They've got good technical experience through the CERT and CESP programmes, so they have been delivering low-carbon improvements into houses and other buildings for a while. And, of course, they've got well-developed supply chains and panels of installers and so on. Then there's local authorities. Birmingham is the one that comes to mind through the Birmingham Energy Savers scheme. But local authorities seem unlikely to become Green Deal providers themselves now. Most local authorities are looking to form partnerships with Green Deal providers, in which the local authority will do the marketing and the promotion and give a certain amount of credibility to the scheme, and the Green Deal provider will be the part that does the delivery. I think to some extent local authorities are unknown quantities because it's not quite clear what it is that they're actually going to bring to the party in many cases. And then you have housing providers, and 1 or 2 of the very largest housing associations have talked about becoming Green Deal providers themselves, and not only facilitating the Green Deal process of improvement in their own housing stocks, but looking over the boundaries of their stocks, as it were, and starting to improve other housing in the vicinity for other housing organisations and indeed for owner-occupiers, and particularly for their own leaseholders. I think it's very unlikely that very many housing organisations will become Green Deal providers. I think that many of them will, like local authorities, form partnerships with Green Deal providers who used to be their framework Decent Homes contractors and Decent Homes organisations. But they do have very well-developed delivery and QA systems. Most housing associations know how to do housing refurbishment, they know how to do retrofit, and they have good contract management and supervision and QA processes in place. Another way of looking at this is to slice it slightly differently and in this case, I've categorized them as inclusive and exclusive. The inclusive kind of Green Deal provider is the sort of organisation that wants to do its marketing in-house, employ all its own assessors, no independence, run its own in-house technical support from its own team, do all its own specification, employ its own installers, do its own inspection and QA, and probably also look after its own project management and its customer care. Now, there aren't actually many organisations seeming to go that way. British Gas was looking to do it that way for quite a while, but I think even they are backing away from it now. It's a very big operation to set up to do that, and it's all highly dependent on a government funding scheme, which we know what happens to government funding schemes. So I think the kind of risk assessment of that is that it's not the best model. Another model is what I call the exclusive model, where the Green Deal provider will be doing their marketing via partners like local authorities and housing associations, maybe even marketing consultants. There'll be a panel of independent Green Deal advisors and assessors who will be called off to undertake the assessments when they're required. There'll be technical support from specialist consultants. There'll be independent installers, probably again via some kind of panel and a framework agreement with subcontracts. There'll be independent QA with a panel of inspectors. And these will have a lesser grip, possibly, on their project management and customer care, unless they can also subcontract that. Now, clearly, the exclusive group are much more interesting to SMEs in the local area, because they're where the opportunities to do work will come from. The opportunities in the Green Deal are with the exclusive type of provider, not really with the inclusive. And then there is actually a third type. There aren't very many of these, but they're quite interesting. What I call the hands-off type of Green Deal provider, simply a financial organisation that wants to provide the finance to bring it down from the city or from the Green Deal finance company and deploy it, but they don't want to do anything else. They don't want to get their hands dirty doing the delivery of retrofit. And so everything else is going to be done for them by partner SMEs. And there are a few of those beginning to emerge. And clearly they need good technical support from people who know the business. I stole this slide from Russell, but essentially the point I wanted to make, I know you can't read the boxes, but essentially if this Green Deal process is a kind of spiral, the boxes on here are all the different tasks that I listed earlier that have to be discharged in order to deliver a Green Deal to a household or to another building. And the blue ones are things that the Green Deal provider has to do, because that's what the rules of the scheme say. And the brown ones are things that could be done by local SMEs working for the Green Deal provider. So you can see that this scheme, so essentially only a finance mechanism, provides lots of opportunities. Every brown box on that slide is an opportunity for local SMEs throughout the country to be working with providers or working together to deliver the Green Deal. There's lots of opportunities for the supply chain in there. So I'm not going to take Russell's thunder. I'll leave him to go into that in more detail in a few minutes. I think the thing to remember is that the Green Deal is simply a finance mechanism. The role, it may seem very complicated, and as we see the publicity rolling out over the next few weeks, I think it'll seem as though this scheme is more complicated than perhaps it needs to be. But actually, the role of the Green Deal provider is very loosely defined. There's lots of opportunities to do things in different ways, and we'll be talking about some of those later this morning. Many types of organisations will become Green Deal providers. I think they won't all know what they're getting into. In fact, I know that they don't all know what they're getting into, and they're learning on the job. So actually, there's lots of scope for local organisations with technical ability, either on the installer side or the assessor side or as consultants, to provide technical assistance to help these people get it right. And for a while, I thought, having my business has been low energy buildings and energy efficiency in buildings for about 30 plus years now. And for a while we thought we were going to help Green Deal providers not to fall into all the holes that we've fallen into over the last 25 years or so. I've given up on that now. What we're going to do is help them out of the holes when they fall in, because I think the learning process is going to be painful for some of these people. So there's lots of scope to help people in and out of the holes or avoid the holes or whatever. I think there are lots of niches. What the Green Deal and Eco programme and the larger national retrofit programme, which they're the first step towards, are doing, is actually transforming the industry, transforming us into an industry which is focused on delivering retrofit across the building stock. We have 20 million houses to do over the next 40 years. We have 2 million non-domestic buildings. It's about one a minute. In fact, it's more than one a minute until 2050. So there's lots to do. It's a big challenge. And actually, the industry needs transforming to get a focus on that. We need to develop the skills, develop the focus, develop the supply chain, develop all the structures and techniques that we need to do it. So there are loads of Green Deal niches for small and medium-sized enterprises. And they'll embrace training, assessments, specification, project management, inspection, monitoring, evaluation, all sorts of things. The trick is to find the right niche for your particular business, because that's certainly, the industry is going in this direction, and the thing everybody should be doing is looking for their niche in the Green Deal. So I suppose what I ought to do is talk about, just kind of come clean really about what Rickaby Thompson Associates, my company, is doing, looking for our niche. Actually, we haven't found our niche yet. We're exploring various places. We're certainly going to be providing a Green Deal advice service with Green Deal assessors and we hope retrofit coordinators. We're certainly already providing technical advice to Green Deal providers on product selection, specifying and integrating measures, quality assurance and risk management. And we'll be doing some training, both of Green Deal advisors via our existing training consortiums, and we'll be training retrofit coordinators in partnership with others and with the professional institutions. So we've been looking to find those slots, as it were, and I think there'll be different slots for every organisation in the industry, really, different slots in the Green Deal.